Welcome to another broadcast of Crime Beat with Ron Chepesiuk, the show that puts you, the listener, into the back alleys and boardrooms of the world's most fascinating subject, crime. Crime Beat brings you a lineup of dynamic and provocative guests who allow you to experience their lives and learn more about crime. Al Prophet, the noted crime documentarian, says, quote, Crime Beat is the best show of its kind for the thinking listener, both entertaining and educational. Let me introduce the host of Crime Beat. A native of Thunder Bay, Canada, Ron Chepesiuk is an award-winning author, documentary producer and director, publisher, and screenwriter. He's the author of more than 36 books and 4,000 published magazine, newspaper, and internet articles. Ron is a two-time Fulbright Scholar to Bangladesh and Indonesia, was a consultant to the History Channel's Gangland TV series, and has worked as an instructor in UCLA's Extension Journalism program. 4 of Ron's books and several of his screenplays have been optioned for movies. For more information, visit ronchepesiuk.com. Given his publications, extensive travels, and in-depth interviews, Ron Chepesiuk today is the leading expert on the fascinating world of crime. Here he is, your host, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Thank you, Scott, for that nice introduction. Good evening, world, wherever you are tonight. Well, Scott, I was surfing on the web today and I ran across an article. It said what people in 1923 thought would happen in 2023. They made some predictions. You want to hear a couple of them?
Yes, I do.
This is a good one. There's no ugly people in right now. No ugly people.
Well, they didn't look at you and me.
I know, that's right. They thought beauty pageants would be obsolete because there'd be no everybody would be beautiful, so you wouldn't have to have contests to point it out. Another thing, they said people will work 4 hours a day. They thought electricity would make that possible. Electricity.
Well, there are some people that do that, get paid for 8, but kind of slouch off the other 4.
Yeah, I work about 12 hours a day, so I'm not in that category. Women will paint their teeth black to be fashionable.
Hey,
everybody's trying to white their teeth today. This is what.
Oh, how attractive that would be.
Yeah, I know. It's good. And this one, this one sounds pretty predictable. Average life expectancy would be 100, and of course it's 76. It's 76 years old. 76 years right now today.
But it's longer in other countries. We're approaching that. Certain countries, like Japan, for instance, it's much higher than 76. But we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. That's right. And one last one here. This was the dawn of air traffic, right? And they predicted that flying from Chicago to Germany would take 18 hours in 2023. Of course, it takes about 9 hours today.
Oh, I was going to say.
Then.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. So they were like zero on all the predictions on that. But in any case, I'm curious to see what they would think about 2024. But that's another story. In any case, we've got a good show. We have a guest back, Jeffrey Sussman, and we'll be discussing his book, Sin City Gangsters, The Rise and Decline of the Mob in Las Vegas. Jeffrey Sussman charts Vegas from the first modest mob-owned casinos to the present billion-dollar resorts. His cast of characters is an assembly of exceedingly ambitious risk-takers who let nothing stand in their way of turning their dreams into stunning realities. Vegas became the domain of Jay Sarno, Kirk Kerkorian, Steve Wynn, and Sheldon Adelson, among others, visionaries who transformed Vegas into the entertainment capital of the world by building billion-dollar-plus resorts and hiring the most popular contemporary entertainers. Jeffrey Sussman chronicles how the most powerful mobsters in the country built, bought, and controlled not only gambling casinos in Vegas, but also many important politicians did the mob's bidding. Some of the most notorious mobsters were Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, Moe Dalitz, Sam Giancana, Tony Accardo, and Nick Civella. We'll be talking about those guys tonight on our show. It'll be an exciting show, and we will be with Jeffrey Sussman shortly to discuss his book. But first, let's take care of some business. Our acknowledgments to the people who helped make Crime Beat one of the most popular shows on the internet. We are now in more than 160 countries, and we've had more than 70 million downloads during the 11-year history of our show, which began January 28, 2011. Shows are free and downloadable. You miss a live show, you go to the artistfirst.com website to listen to it. You can take our shows and post them on the web on any website. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Strategic Media Books, for supporting our show. Thanks also to production people at Artist First Radio Network for making this show possible, and a special thanks to the Ryan Brothers for allowing us to use their great music for our theme song. It's got the Beat the Crime written all over it. I was looking at the mailbag this week. We continue to get mail from all over the world. Some comments are long, so we short them, edit them for length. This one is from Kathy. Location identified. Kathy writes, quote, "Your show on the Ann Harrison murder really touched me. It's really sad to know such evil exists in the world." It sure does. We had a 15-year-old girl, Ann Harrison, that was kidnapped and brutally raped, and it shook up the town of Raytown in Missouri. And they finally got the two killers, and it took about 25 years before they were executed on that. So that was an interesting show, wasn't it, Scott?
Yes, it was, as are most of your shows.
Yeah, that's right. On that, we've had great luck with guests. So what have you been up to? Go to www.strategicmediabooks.com. We have several books coming out, which might meet your fancy on true crime. We offer affordable advertising opportunities for sponsors and authors. We have several packages that meet your budget. Contact us at crimebeat123@yahoo.com. I was looking at next week's show, and on February 16th, we're going to have Martin Dugman, and he's the co-author with Bill O'Reilly of the Killing series, and he's written a book called Taking Berlin. So it's going to be a real special honor to have him on the show, and we'll look forward to that. I was looking at news for this week. We call this the rap sheet part of our program. Our rap sheet features a couple items in the news that caught our attention you might have missed. This first one here is an interesting case. It is filed against a Lake Stevens teacher who's accused of sex crimes against minors. Lake Stevens is in Washington State. The teacher was arrested at Lake Stevens High School last week and was booked into the Snohomish County Jail for investigation of 2 counts of fourth-degree assault with sexual motivation and a bunch of other crimes. Judge has granted a motion to dismiss the case without prejudice for, quote, prosecutorial review and refiling. The arrest was the result of a long investigation by the Lake Stevens detectives who said the teacher is a Lake Stevens School District staff member and a leader of a local youth group that meets on Friday nights. And according to the Lake Stevens School District, the teacher has been on paid administrative leave since mid-August. District Superintendent Dr. Ken Collins sent out a letter to students and family regarding the arrest and saying that they fully cooperated with the investigation and that they can't talk about it right now, which is really interesting. Though the police department has not said how many victims may have been involved in the accusations, the detectives said that there may be more victims who have yet to come forward. Wow, that's really interesting. I decided to present this item because, usually it's cut and dried, right? Somebody gets arrested for sexual assault and he's found guilty. And in this case, they're sort of holding off. It's just kind of weird, right?
Yeah, sometimes I just scratch my head. What are they doing?
Yeah, on that then. So we'll keep an eye on that story, on that then. And this second story is an interesting one. We have a judge has dismissed the case filing against, excuse me a second here. We have a Iowa care facility, and it's facing fines totaling $10,000 after mistakenly pronouncing a 66-year-old resident dead and having her transported to a funeral home where she woke up gasping for air. New report from the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals, the details the series of events that led up to the woman being mistakenly pronounced dead. The unidentified resident who had been at Glen Oaks Alzheimer's Special Care Center since December 2021 was moved into hospice care at the facility on December 28, 2022 because of, quote, senile degeneration of the brain. And while in hospice care, comfort measures were taken. Over the course of several days, staff members recorded occurrences of diminished lung sounds and minor seizures. On January 3rd of this year, the woman was pronounced dead at 6 a.m. after an employee identified as Staff C said that she did not feel a pulse and found the resident, quote, was not breathing at the time. A funeral director arrived shortly after 7:30 p.m. and with the assistance of another nurse identified as LPND, the resident was placed in a body bag which was zipped shut. The funeral director left the facility shortly afterwards at 8:26 p.m. a.m. All employees at the Giancana Funeral Home and Crematorium unzipped the bag. They observed the resident chest moving, and she gasped for air, the report says. And then they called 911 and the care facility. When ESS responded, they were able to record a pulse and breathing, but there was no eye movement and no verbal response. That same day, the resident returned to care facility. She passed away early in the morning of January 5th with her family at her side, the report said. The facility faces 2 state violations from the DIA, which could result in a $10,000 fine. That's my worst nightmare, Scott, waking up and you're in a casket and you're being buried, but you're still alive.
Yeah, didn't they used to put, in the old days, they'd run a string down to the casket and put a bell up on top near the headstone so you could ring the bell if you woke up in the casket?
Yeah, that's true on that. But it was, and you only get fined $10,000.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like enough.
I don't know what kind of charge they would have.
Wow.
Yeah. In any case, that's it for the rap sheet part of our program. After a station identification break by Scott, we'll be back to the main part of our show.
You are listening to Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. If you're a young lady out there that would like to paint your teeth black to become more attractive, please send us a photo to dj@artistfirst.com. Back to your host, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. Well, listeners, Crime Beat feature guest this evening is Jeffrey Sussman, who will be discussing his book, City Gangsters, The Rise and Decline of the Mob in Las Vegas. Jeffrey Sussman is the author of 16 books, several of them we have discussed on the show. You go to his website, to our website to listen to the archive show. 6 of them have been published by Roman and Littlefield. His most recent titles include Big Apple Gangsters, The Rise and Decline of the Mob in New York, Holocaust Fighters, Boxers, Resistors, and Avengers, and Boxing and the Mob, The Notorious History of the Sweet Science. With no further ado, welcome to the show, Jeffrey Sussman.
Thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Yeah, you just keep cranking out these books, don't you?
I'm trying to do a book a year until I die.
A book a year until you die, which is pretty good because you've got to really. I don't know why you do it because I'm finishing a book now, and every time I'm finishing a book, I'm always saying, "Why am I doing this?" Because I mean, the amount of work you put in, it ends up at minimum wage, right?
Exactly, but you do it because you love doing it.
Yeah,
you really don't do it for the money.
Yeah, exactly. And if the money comes in, it's a bonus,
It's always a happy surprise when the money arrives.
Yeah, on that then. So you've done this book on the Las Vegas mob. Why did you decide to do it? There's all kinds of books on the mob in Las Vegas. It's one of the most covered topics in organized crime.
My interest was piqued based on 3 encounters that I had. Back in the 1970s, I met a man named Big Julie Weintraub, who he was about 6'5". He had a broken nose. He looked like a heavyweight boxer, and he was the man who invented the taking people to Las Vegas, high rollers, and he began doing that because he was a compulsive dice player, and he was always losing money, and he figured if he could get these high rollers on a junket to Las Vegas, these were men who would spend or lose $250,000 in a week. and he got a percentage of their losses, and it covered his losses. So it worked out very, very, very well for him. And a few times a year, he would send these people to the Dunes Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. So that was the first thing that sparked my interest. And then one year during the Christmas holidays, I was on vacation at a resort in Southern California called La Costa, and I was invited to someone's house on New Year's Eve to a party, and I was standing there with an elderly man. We each had a drink in our hand, and he said, "Oh, my back hurts, I've got to sit down." So I sat down with him on a couch, and I asked him what he did, and he said that he was a partner of Moe Dalitz and a couple of other men, and they owned the Desert Inn Hotel and Casino.
Right.
And he told me that one year Howard Hughes and his entourage of Mormons came and they took over the top 2 floors of the Desert Inn. And because they were Mormons, they didn't gamble or drink. And the top 2 floors were reserved for these high rollers who would lose a lot of money, and they comped them by putting them in the best rooms in the hotel. And now they had no place to put them. So he said, we went to Howard Hughes, and we said, you've got to move out, or you can buy the place from us. And we figured, well, we'll ask him, 4 or 5 times the value of the hotel casino, because he won't pay it, and he'll move out. So we presented him with that figure, and to our surprise, he said, I'll buy it. And he bought the Desert Inn from us. So that was my second encounter that piqued my interest. And the third one was, in my marketing PR business, I had represented a trucking company in Chicago, and the owner of the company invited me to dinner at a private club he belonged to in downtown Chicago. He said, I'll meet you there at 6:30. We'll have drinks and dinner. Well, I got there early, and I went into the club, and I saw him. He was sitting at the bar with another man, and he introduced me. He said, Jeff, this is Tony, and he said, Tony, this is Jeff. And then he said, Jeff, why don't you go and sit down in the dining room, tell the maitre d' you're with me, and I'll be in a few minutes. So I sat down and I waited for him to come in. And when he came in, I said, who was that guy you were talking with? And he said, his name is Tony Accardo. He's head of the outfit in Chicago. And I was speaking to him because we were having a problem with people pilfering from our trucks, and he said he would take care of it for us and not to worry about it. And then he pulled out a big button that must have been 5 inches in diameter, and it was a picture of Tony Accardo on it. And on the button it said, "Happy Birthday, Big Tuna." And he gave me the button, and he said, "Wear this any place in Chicago, and no one will ever bother you." He said, "You could probably hold up a bank, and no one would bother you." Right. And I had no idea who Tony Accardo was. When I got back to New York, I looked him up, and I found out, he was a major gangster, head of the outfit, and he had interests in a lot of the hotel casinos in Las Vegas. So it was those 3 encounters that sparked my interest in writing about Las Vegas.
Yeah, Accardo ran the outfit for like 40 years, and nobody knew who he was. I mean, he was one of the most low-key godfathers in mob history.
Yeah, when I that brief time I was introduced to him, he looked like a very unassuming businessman.
Yeah, which he was, except he was on the wrong side of the law.
Exactly.
On that. Yeah, so, you've come up with this idea, but you got to work full time, right? You got to make a living on that. I guess you're kind of fortunate because you own your own PR company, right?
Exactly.
On that.
So I can work at nights and on the weekends.
Right. And, well, in this case, I'm sure you must have talked to a lot of people, right?
Oh, yeah, I did. I talked to Meyer Lansky's grandson, Meyer Lansky II.
Right.
I talked to Moe Dalitz, who is one of the most interesting gangsters I've ever encountered. His daughter, Susan Dalitz, I had many long conversations with her that were quite fascinating. And then I had discussions with the son and daughter of Jay Sarno, also, right, which was quite fascinating. And a man named Tony Napoli, who's now deceased, who was one of the managers at the Sands Hotel and Casino, who told me a fascinating story about what happened to Frank Sinatra when Tony was the manager there.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
In the show on that then. So how long did it take you to do the book?
I give myself a year to do all my books, and I do the research and a chapter at a time. So I do the research, then I write the chapter about it, then I do the next bit of research, and I write that chapter.
Do you have an outline that you start with?
Yes, I absolutely start with an outline, and I create a proposal, for my publisher and an outline, and I get busy working.
Yeah. Well, the book is really readable, and
thank you.
It's kind of really interesting. Like you had the anecdote there about Bugsy Siegel about being afraid of losing his hair. And which I thought was really funny. He was kind of obsessed with it, right? With his looks. And he was a good-looking guy too.
He was a very good-looking guy, but he was very narcissistic. So he was also worried about developing a double chin at some point. So he used to sleep with an elastic band that went around his head and held the skin under his chin up so it wouldn't sag.
Yeah, he didn't like the name Bugsy, did he?
He hated it. I mean, if people called him Bugsy, he went berserk. It became really violent.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because he hooked up with Meyer Lansky, who's like a really sensible businessman. I mean, really cool, calculated, and he was sort of a loose cannon, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was such a weird partnership. They had met when they were teenagers on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, along with Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, and all four of them became lifelong pals and cooperated with each other in their various business endeavors.
Right. So, about 1946, Meyer Lansky got an interest in casinos in Las Vegas, right? What was Las Vegas like at the time?
Well, prior to 1946, there were casinos in Las Vegas, but they were known as sawdust casinos because they were like cowboy saloons with sawdust on the on the floors, and they had roulette and a lot of card games.
Right. And so he decided to work with Bugsy in building this first casino, right? The Flamingo.
Well, what happened is that the Flamingo was originally the idea of a man named Billy Wilkerson, who owned the Hollywood Reporter magazine and some restaurants in Beverly Hills. And he started building that, and he ran out of money. And so he foolishly borrowed money from the mob, specifically Lansky and Siegel. And they quickly pushed him out, and he was reluctant to go, and Siegel threatened to kill him, so Wilkerson went to Europe for a year. And Siegel then got the money he needed and to build the Flamingo. However, he went way overboard. I mean, it was only supposed to cost $1 million to build, and it wound up costing $6 million.
Right. On that then. Yeah, and he got into trouble with Meyer Lansky, right? I mean,
well,
they thought he was stealing money.
Well, he was skimming from the money they gave him, and his girlfriend, Virginia Hill, was also skimming money, the two of them. And Luciano and Meyer Lansky, who were really the heads of the National Crime Syndicate, they said, you've got to pay back the money. And he didn't have the money to pay them back. And they demanded it a few times, and then it was too late. They just arranged for him to be killed. Right.
But that didn't stop them. I mean, they got rid of Bugsy, but they continued, right, with the project.
They continued. They had two other men who were members of their gang who had been with them since their teenage years, a man named Moe Sedway and Gus Greenbaum. And Gus Greenbaum was brilliant at managing casinos and making them extremely profitable, but he also turned out eventually to be a heroin addict, and he started skimming from a different casino that he was put in charge of, and the mob wound up killing him as well eventually.
Wow. Why did they think that building casinos in Las Vegas would work? I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere. And why did they think people would come?
Well, they had owned casinos in Havana and Cuba, and they had to pay off the dictator of Cuba and it cost them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was a foreign country, and a lot of people might have been reluctant to go there, but they figured, right here in America, we can bribe the politicians. It'll be easy for people to come to, and there were a lot of men who are getting out of the army at the end of World War II. They have money to burn. They're looking for entertainment. Initially we'll just have people from California and Arizona coming to this. But if we make it really attractive and have great entertainment and make it spectacular, we can get people from all over the country to come.
Wow, on that then. And they started to come, right? And
absolutely.
Of course, yeah, and they also attracted the attention of the government. It's only like 4 years after the Desert Inn was built that Kefauver came to Las Vegas and started to investigate what in the world was going on.
Right, and it was interesting because when they subpoenaed Moe Dalitz to come before the Kefauver committee, he was very smart. He hired as his attorney a man who had been Kefauver's friend in law school and who worked with Kefauver in the practice of law, and so Kefauver went very, very soft on Dalitz. In addition to which, Dalitz was paying off the senator from Nevada at the time, Senator McCarran, and McCarran was on that same committee, and to benefit Dalitz, he cut a lot of the funds for the committee so that they really weren't able to go after all the targets that they wanted to go after.
Right. So it was a failure then, right?
Absolutely.
The mission on that then. So that gave the mob a sort of free rein to develop Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, they controlled the governor, they controlled the senators, they controlled local officials. They had in with the newspapers. It was paradise for them. They were able to do pretty much anything that they wanted to do there.
Well, what about the government itself, the federal government? Weren't they getting suspicious of what was going on in Las Vegas?
Well, Robert Kennedy, when he became Attorney General, went after them in a big way. He primarily went after Jimmy Hoffa, who was involved with the mob because the Teamster Central States Pension Fund funded most of the casinos, including Moe Dalitz's The Desert Inn. And so they wanted to nail these people. And he created a lot of heat for the mobsters in Las Vegas. But fortunately for the mobsters, after his brother was assassinated, his investigations kind of dried up.
Right, on that then. Let's stop there, and we'll take a break, and then we'll come back with the second part of our show tonight. Scott, let's take a break, run some commercials, and we'll be back.
Crime Beat host Ron Chepesiuk's new book, The Real Mr. Big, How a Colombian Refugee Became the United Kingdom's Most Notorious Cocaine Kingpin. It's the story of an ambitious Colombian refugee who immigrated to the United Kingdom and set up a sophisticated drug trafficking organization that the British Secret Service MI5 claims made more than £1 billion over a 10-year period. That made him the UK's first billionaire cocaine dealer. Ruiz Henao's impact on the British economy was such that the price of cocaine increased 50% for several months after his arrest. British law enforcement dubbed him the Pablo Escobar of British drug trafficking. Go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble to buy your copy of Ron Chepesiuk's The Real Mr. Big, How a Colombian Refugee Became the United Kingdom's Most Notorious Cocaine Kingpin. You will enjoy it. And after you do, don't forget to leave a review.
Hi, this is Rhea Fry. Check out my new book, Until I Find You, available now wherever books are sold. You can learn more at rheafry.com. That's REAFREY.com. And you are listening to the Artist First Radio Network.
You're listening to Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. Send your questions and comments to crimebeat123@yahoo.com. Back to your host, Ron Chepesiuk.
Thank you, Scott. We're here with Jeffrey Sussman, and we're discussing his really fascinating book, Sin City Gangsters, The Rise and Decline of the Mob in Las Vegas. The book is everywhere, right?
You can get it online at Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com and dozens of other online booksellers.
Right. There's an ebook and audiobook?
There's no audiobook yet, but it's also available as a Kindle book if you're interested.
Right. Yeah, I think it'd make a good audiobook on that, and let's hope it comes out. Yourself, you're active on social media, right?
Yeah, I post a lot of things on. I have a lot of video clips on YouTube, and I post things on Facebook and Twitter.
Right, on that then. And what about Instagram, and do you dance on TikTok?
No, I haven't done anything on Instagram and TikTok, but I probably should.
Right, on that then. That sounds good. Okay, let's getting back to our discussion here. What's interesting about the mob in Las Vegas is that they were able to work together, right? They sort of coalesced. I mean, they worked out a deal, and nobody touched each other's or stepped on each other's shoes, and it seemed to work for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, Las Vegas was known as an open city for the mob. So any mob family that wanted to come in was able to come in, but they just had to not step on the toes of those who were there and running their own casinos.
Right, on that. And you have some really interesting characters in the book. You mentioned Moe Dalitz, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about him. He played a very central role in the development of Las Vegas, and he won some kind of awards for his service on that sort of thing. Talk about him, and he died in 1989.
He was a fascinating man. He started out as a bootlegger during Prohibition, and when Prohibition ended, he opened a couple of gambling casinos in Kentucky and Indiana, and he was a soldier in World War II. He was a very successful soldier, and was discharged at the end of the war. He decided he would go to Las Vegas. That was the place to be, and start a casino. And he had known Jimmy Hoffa beginning in the 1930s in Detroit, and he was able to call upon Hoffa, and Hoffa arranged for the Central States Pension Fund to provide money for him to build the Desert Inn. Now, what was really interesting is that it was similar in some ways to the Flamingo, because a man named Wilbur Clark had started the Desert Inn and didn't have the money to complete it. Right. And so he went to Moe Dalitz and his partners, and they got the money through the Central States Pension Fund, and they took 75% of the Desert Inn, and they let Clark keep 25%. And Clark was happy with that, but they wanted it to be known as Wilbur Clark's Desert Inn. They didn't want their names out front because they thought it would just attract negative attention. So they were very smart that way. And and they also got money from Meyer Lansky, and Meyer Lansky and Moe Dalitz were good friends, and they invested in probably 10 other casinos, and Moe Dalitz was making millions and millions of dollars. And as he grew older, he sold off his interests in the casinos, and he started building things in Las Vegas. He built hospitals, he built schools, he built churches, he built synagogues, he built shopping malls. He donated money to start a medical school at the University of Nevada. He became a major philanthropist, and he received honors. He was invited to the inaugurations of Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and others. He was a close friend of senators and governors, and he became known as Mr. Las Vegas. And here was a guy who started out as a gangster and never spent one day in jail. I mean, he was just a very, very smart, understated man who knew exactly what he was doing, and he never resorted to violence. If he had to have someone hurt, he would have it done through somebody else. He wouldn't do it.
Right. And, I mean, it's amazing. He was named a Humanitarian of the Year.
I know.
For philanthropic contributions. How could you see him just standing up there accepting his award?
Yeah, and it was delivered, I think, by Joan Rivers, the comedian.
Yeah.
It was just an extraordinary life that he lived. You know, so many men who started out as bootleggers in Prohibition, you know, it took their families 3 generations to get to that point of wealth and respectability and philanthropy that he achieved in just one lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing, and you know, being friends with Jimmy Hoffa is kind of interesting too. You know, how was Hoffa, that pension fund? How was it able to be rifled for money to support mob activities for such a long time?
Well, you know, what was interesting is all of these casinos paid back their money. You know, it wasn't as if they stole it and kept it. They couldn't get a lot of initially. The banks wouldn't lend money to the casino owners because they thought that they were gangsters, and they thought lending money for a casino was too risky.
Right.
So that's why they went to the Teamsters. Of course, he gave them a very low interest rate, but they paid back all the money, and Hoffa made a lot of money from it because he took a 10% commission on all the loans that were made.
Right. Well, he disappeared in '75. And it's one of the country's biggest mysteries. What did Dallas say about that?
Well, you know, it was interesting because I interviewed a man who was Jimmy Hoffa's lawyer,
right.
And I learned a lot of things. He implied more than he specifically stated, but in my research, it turned out that Tony Provenzano, who was a Teamster official in New Jersey, was the one who ordered Hoffa's death, as well as a Detroit mobster named Anthony Giancana, and there were 2 brothers who the FBI is fairly certain were responsible for killing him. They were the Regulio brothers, and one of them prior to testifying was leaving a restaurant in Little Italy in New York, and 2 men met him outside. They pushed him to the sidewalk, and they shot him several times so that he could never testify about the murder and disappearance of Hoffa.
On that, that's really amazing on that. But the history of Las Vegas is populated with all kinds of interesting, even weird characters. One of the weirdest is Howard Hughes.
Yeah, well, you know, he arrived there.
He showed up and he buys the town, but he never see him because he never leaves his room.
That's right. He arrived in a sealed, germ-free railroad car, and was taken on a stretcher in an ambulance to the Desert Inn, and he stayed in his room there for 2 years. He never left, and yet he had his emissaries going out buying up to 12 casinos for him, and one night he looked out of his window and he saw the blinking sign for the Silver Slipper Casino, and he hated that blinking sign, so he bought the Silver Slipper and got rid of the sign.
What the hell was he going to do with all the hotels?
Eventually, he sold them also.
That's really weird. We mentioned Accardo, the outfit godfather that you met. He was really powerful, right, in terms of his influence in Las Vegas.
Yeah, well, he and you know, I think it was late in the 1970s or early 1980s. He and Meyer Lansky came to an arrangement where the East Coast mobsters would have total control of Atlantic City, and the outfit would then be free to operate the way they wanted to in Las Vegas, and the outfit owned 4 major casinos in Las Vegas at that time.
Right. Did the mobs have any trouble, any violence where they disagreed about certain things or got a little greedy?
No, there was never any problem between Lansky and the outfit, or the East Coast mobsters and the outfit. There were problems when the outfit sent Tony Spilotro to Las Vegas to protect the skim at the hotels. Because he was a very violent man, and he started killing people and robbing homes, and he brought a lot of heat on the outfit, which is why the outfit killed him.
Right, on that then. And so what was the government? Did they try to investigate and try to prosecute the mob, get them out of Las Vegas?
Yeah, they did. And a lot of people didn't realize at the time, but, Lefty Rosenthal, who had also been sent by the outfit to manage their casinos, he was an FBI informant the entire time, and the FBI used his information eventually to prosecute people who were part of the Kansas City mob, who were working. They were almost like a subsidiary of the outfit, the Kansas City mob.
On that then, and there's other mobsters too. I mean, it's just stories peopled with fascinating characters. We have the Nick Civella, the Kansas City mob guy, and he was actually banned, right, by the Gaming Commission in the Nevada Gaming Commission from entering casinos in Nevada.
Yeah, and most of the mobsters were. I mean, I spoke to somebody who had investigated Nick Civella and said he was a very, very smart guy who controlled things like a general controls an army, but after he died, the people who were left to run the Kansas City mob, they didn't have the brains and the skill that he did, and things began falling apart for them.
Right. The mob seemed to have a lot of bright guys in Las Vegas, like Accardo and Civella, but they had some real live wires like Sam Giancana, right?
It was interesting because Tony Accardo, being a smart guy, wanted Sam Giancana to be the front man for the outfit, and he kind of put him in charge of the outfit, but he was so unpredictable and violent that eventually he sent him to Mexico, and he took over the running of the outfit again. He didn't want to, but he did on a temporary basis, and then other people came and ran it.
Right, on that then. Let's stop there, and this will end the second part of our show. We'll be back with the final part. Scott, let's take a break, run a few commercials, and we'll be back.
Hi, I'm James Baller of Artist First Radio, and I would like to tell you about a fascinating new book from Crime Beat's Ron Chepesiuk and co-author Mike Rowe. It's titled Robin Hood of the Hood, The Life and Times of Teddy Rowe, Policy Kingpin, and it's published by Strategic Media Books. The book is a historical account of Theodore Teddy Rowe, who courageously fought the Chicago Mafia, more commonly known as the Outfit, for control of the lucrative policy racket in the Windy City. Policy, often called the numbers, is a form of illegal gambling or illegal lottery, played mostly in poor and working-class neighborhoods in the United States. In Policy, a bettor attempts to pick 3 digits to match those that will be randomly drawn the following day. For decades, Policy had been a staple in the black community, but when the white mob flexed its power in the late 1940s, many policy kings knuckled under the pressure. Not Teddy Rowe. Rowe famously told mob bosses that he'd rather die than give up control of his operation. Robin Hood of the Hood chronicles an exciting chapter of Chicago history. Go to the Kindle store at Amazon and buy it for just $2.99. For information about this book and other titles, please go to strategicmediabooks.com. That's strategicmediabooks.com.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhum.music.com. And you are listening to the Artist First Radio Network. Thank you.
Hi, this is Richard Story. If you love the suspense of Agatha Christie and the mystery of Dan Brown, check out my book, The Cryptic Lines, available from Amazon, and visit my website, crypticpublications.com. And you are listening to the Artist First Radio Network.
You're listening to Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. All 609 past shows are available as podcasts. Visit artistfirst.com. Back to your host, Ron Chepesiuk.
609, wow.
It's a lot of shows.
I know. An interview with, we're here with Jeffrey Sussman, and we're discussing his really fascinating book, Sin City Gangsters, The Rise and Decline of the Mob in Las Vegas. The book is everywhere. There's no audiobook yet. There's an ebook. You go to Amazon.com, and Jeffrey's active on social media. You can check out Facebook, Twitter, and catch him on YouTube on that. And do you have a website, Jeffrey?
I'm in the process of creating a new website right now.
Right. On that.
But it's not up and running yet.
Okay, that sounds good. You can catch you on Facebook then.
Facebook, YouTube, Twitter.
Right, on that. So getting back to our discussion, we think of Las Vegas being a gambling haven, but it's also an entertainment center too, which attracts as many people probably as the gambling on that. And nobody was more famous than Frank Sinatra, but you describe him as a very nasty guy.
Well,
and he got his comeuppance, right?
Absolutely. A man named Tony Napoli, who's dead now, was the son of a major a mobster, a bookmaker who controlled a lot of the bookmaking throughout the east coast of the United States, named Jimmy Napoli. And he got his son a job as a manager of just the casino part of the Sands. And it was after Howard Hughes had bought it, and Howard Hughes said that anybody who owed the casino money would not be issued any more credit until they paid off the money that they owed. And Frank Sinatra was gambling there one night, and he was playing blackjack, and he lost $50,000, and he wanted credit for another $50,000, and the casino wouldn't give it to him. And he became berserk. He started throwing things around and cursing people, and he wanted to speak to the manager, the overall manager of the place, a man named Carl Cohn. And he went into the telephone operator's room and said, "Call him. I want him down here immediately." And they said, he cannot be disturbed. It's the middle of the night, and you can't do it. And Sinatra went berserk, and he started ripping the telephones out of the wall. And they had to call security and have Sinatra removed from the room. And finally, at about 5:30 or 6 in the morning, they were able to arouse Carl Cohn, and he agreed to meet Sinatra in the Garden Lounge, which is like a coffee shop in the Sands. And they met, and they were sitting in a booth opposite one another. And Frank Sinatra brought his bodyguard and friend, a man named Julie Rizzo, with him. And Sinatra was yelling and screaming at Carl Cohn. And Carl Cohn gets up to leave, and he says, "I don't have to put up with this, and I'm getting out of here." And Sinatra says, "What are you frightened of?" And Carl says, "I'm not frightened of you or your bodyguard." And Carl Cohn was a big guy. He was, about 6'3", 6'4". Wow. And he sits down again, and Sinatra then all of a sudden really starts cursing at him. He called him a dirty Jewish kike. And Carl Cohn picks up Sinatra by his shirt collars, punches him in the face, and knocks out his 4 front teeth. Sinatra then says to his bodyguard, "Julie, get him." And Julie holds up both hands and says, "I'm not getting involved." and then
what happened?
And then Sinatra picks up a chair and throws it at Carl Cohn. It misses him and hits a security guard in the head. And so Tony Napoli is called in, and he drives Sinatra to a dental surgeon to have his upper lip sewn up, and then he drives him back to the Sands, and Sinatra's fuming. He's furious, and he drives his golf cart through a plate glass window at the Sands, and then he flies back to Los Angeles, and he called Tony Napoli's father, Jimmy Nap, and he said, "I want to do something to get even with Carl Cohn." And Jimmy Nap says to him, "You can't. He's one of us, Frank. You understand what I mean? He's one of us." He said, "Look, you're just an entertainer, but you're not one of us. You don't belong to us." And he said, "In addition, look who's signing your checks. Carl Cohn is signing your checks. They're big checks They're for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're checks to you as an entertainer, not for anything else. And so you have to understand that Carl isn't untouchable. So that ended that. But the people in the hotel whom Sinatra treated badly. So, for example, one day in the hotel, someone served him a hamburger, and it wasn't to his liking, and he threw it against the wall and demanded that the waiter and the chef be fired. So there were a lot of people who had a lot of resentment towards Frank Sinatra, and when they heard the Carl Cohn story, they put up a poster all over Las Vegas of a big picture of Frank Sinatra with his 4 front teeth blacked out, and then on the poster it said, "Vote for Carl Cohn for mayor."
So what happened to Carl Cohn?
Well, he died of old age eventually, but he was a part owner of the of the Sands. He was a member of the mob, and that what made him untouchable. He had a son who was a very successful actor, by the way. Did you ever see the movie Rebel Without a Cause with James?
Yeah.
You know the character Buzz who goes over a cliff?
Yeah.
That was Carl Cohn's son.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Well, there's a lot of really famous people that came in, and I'm sure Elvis was not as nasty as Frank, right?
Who?
But he played a big part in the development of Las Vegas.
Oh, you mean Elvis?
Yeah, Elvis.
Yeah. He was, a relatively nice guy. He got along well with people. He treated people well. He wasn't as well paid as Sinatra. Whereas Sinatra may have been paid at the height $400,000 a week. Elvis was getting between $100 and $150, and his manager wasn't doing a great job for him. His manager was a compulsive gambler who just wanted as many freebies as he could get out of Las Vegas.
Right. On that then. Well, the presence of organized crime was Vegas was reduced, I think, in the 1970s after the Nevada legislature allowed for public corporations to own casinos, right?
Well, that happened as a result of Howard Hughes.
Right.
Because he bought a lot of mob-owned casinos, and then when he left, those casinos that he bought, they were bought by, legitimate publicly held corporations.
Right, on that then. Well, your book has the word decline in it. Of the mob. So you think the mob has declined over the years? Is it as powerful as it once was?
The mob is powerful, but not as powerful in Las Vegas as it once was. I mean, they don't own any casinos as far as I know anymore, but they own ancillary businesses that service the casinos, and they probably have influence with some unions as well.
Right.
So they're sort of tangentially connected to Las Vegas now, right. But they're not dominant the way they were before.
Right. Well, there's businessmen now that are dominant, like Jay Sarno and Kirk Kerkorian, right?
Yeah, and these are all legitimate businessmen who had publicly held companies that that are on the New York Stock Exchange. Right. You couldn't imagine. The Flamingo or the Desert Inn in the 1940s or 50s being on the stock exchange.
Right, on that then. Yeah, when I've done a couple of books on organized crime, and money laundering in Las Vegas was one of the things that they were involved with. Where is that today? Is it still being used as a money laundering center?
Not really. The money laundering happened because they were able to skim so much money out of the count rooms and send it all over the country. And they had couriers who would do it, and Meyer Lansky was in charge of distributing this money to all the various people that owned points in the casinos. And these were people who couldn't legally own any casinos because they were in what was called the Black Book because of their criminal histories. But they were in the background. They owned pieces of the casino, and Meyer Lansky made sure that all of them got their money every single month. I mean, it was just extraordinary.
Right. Is the arrangement still in effect with the outfit and the East Coast mob, where they divided up the country in terms of casinos and gambling?
Yeah, I would say so. To the extent that they're still involved with it. But but both of them are also very involved now in a lot of offshore gambling.
Right. Yeah, and gambling has opened up now. I mean, in the country, right? I suppose.
Oh, it's all over now. You have in New York City, they're thinking of putting a casino in Times Square.
Exactly. And I saw today the Super Bowl. 20% of the people that are going to watch it are going to bet.
Exactly.
On gaming, there's like 2,000 variations that they could bet on. So that must take away from the mob power.
Right. And people are betting on all kinds of sports now.
Yeah.
Not just the super. Baseball, football, basketball, soccer.
Exactly. Well, given the mob, they always want a piece of the action. Can they get into something like this, you think?
Well, I think they can through bookies. People bet with bookies, and then they're going to borrow money from Shylocks, and so that is all controlled by the mob.
Right. So what's up for you now? You finished this book. It's really a good book.
Thank you very much.
I know it's going to do well. And
thank you.
What are you planning for your next? You're welcome. What are you planning for your next project?
Another mob book, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm investigating a number of possibilities about the mob in various entertainment fields.
Right. Well, I'm sure it'll be an interesting book, and we wish you all the success.
Thank you,
your
Ron.
writing career on that, then, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And we'll until we see each other again, you'll be back on the show at some time on that then. So just let us know what you're doing.
I will. I look forward to it.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Wow, listeners, that was a really interesting show, Las Vegas Mob. We're back again on February 16th of this year. We'll have Martin Dugard, the author of Taking Berlin. Dugard is the co-author of books with Bill Riley, so it should be an interesting show. We hope you enjoyed Crime Beat this evening on the Artist First World Radio Network, wherever you are tonight. I'd like to thank all of you out there for listening to our broadcast this evening. In the meantime, we welcome your emails and thoughts about our program. Email us at crimebeat123@yahoo.com. And please spread the word about our show. And until next week, we hope you tune in to Crime Beat next Thursday, same time at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you want to have a front row seat to the fascinating world of crime. Sleep tight, everybody.